last evening, I had the opportunity to head on out to the Nashville Fairgrounds at Speedway. There was a rally about 4 o'clock in advance of the renovation of the Speedway. And then there was a public meeting held at 5 o'clock at Geodis Park. Councilman Young has been with us in the past. He represents parts of Goodlettsville and parts beyond on the Metro Council. He has been a champion for the renovation of the Fairgrounds Speedway, and he joins us on the Murphy Show hotline to talk about how he felt like the event went last night. Zach, it was good to see you last evening. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Matt. Thanks for having me. I thought we had a pretty great event last night. What about you?
I did. I loved the enthusiasm. I thought that amongst the assembled group, everyone was calm. Everyone seemed to be pleasant and polite to one another. But I think the renovation crowd well represented themselves, and it was so good to hear yet again Jerry Caldwell lay out how advantageous this is for the city of Nashville. Because, I mean, to me, to you, Zach, this is just a no-brainer thing that we need to get done.
It is, Matt. And in fact, one person speaking in support of the track last night even asked, why are we even here? This is a no-brainer. And he was right. But we still had a lot of people on the opposition with the same talking points that are outright lies being put out by these front groups pushed, by these AstroTurf groups with people hired to be there, pushing out lies, saying that Bristol's not putting money into that. That's a lie. Saying the neighborhood doesn't want it. That's a lie. We have the polling to prove it. And they're just grabbing at straws, trying everything they can.
One of the things that frightens me, and one of the reasons that I talk about this, the amount that I do on the show, and I'm so happy to have someone on the council like yourself, Zach, that really continues to push this. And I know there are others that stand there right behind you. I think most Nashvillians feel like we put this issue to bed several years ago when the vote came out, right? It was a 71% vote to keep racing at the fairgrounds, correct?
That's exactly right. It was 71% of the voters came out 2011 and said, we want to protect racing at the fairgrounds. And here we have an opportunity to continue protecting it for generations to come with a world-class operator. And yet we have people who have maybe moved here and decided they don't like it, but the voters of this county want it. And I'm sorry if there's a truck in the background.
No, it's all good.
Election, and I'm working the early voting poll right now.
No, man, I love it. You keep after it. Keep asking for those. If you have to pause and say, Matt, hold on a second, I need to ask for someone's vote, go ahead and do that. I'd love to hear that. So just for those just joining in on the conversation, what do we need to do to press this issue and to put it to bed? Because it feels like, and I don't want to name names here, but I have to just call it like I see it. Colby Sledge represents that district. He doesn't seem to like this deal very much for his own reasons, and I don't know what those reasons are. And he slow-walked this public meeting to the point that it's putting us behind the eight ball on getting this done during this session of the council.
That's exactly right. He was asked to hold this meeting for more than 6 months ago, and he said, he was busy. And then 5 months ago, he was asked again. He was still busy. And so now when he finally called the meeting, he did it strategically at a time when he knew that there were only 2 meetings left of council in this term, and we can't have first reading on the Speedway deal until that hearing happens. So now that it has happened, we have 2 meetings left in the term, but we can call a special meeting. So what we need is people to continue reaching out to their council members and the mayor's office and the vice mayor, explaining why this is a good deal for the city, that the people of Nashville support this, and that we need to have a special called meeting before the end of this month to get it passed. And guess what, Matt? Guess who had 2 special called meetings in August 2018 to get their deal through? The soccer stadium. So the precedent has been set for a special called meeting.
Well, it was no mistake that the public meeting about the renovation of the fairgrounds happened at the soccer stadium. I thought that that optic was intentional, right?
It was a nice room. The air was good and cold. I thought it was a nice place to have the meeting right there in the community. But I'll let folks draw their own conclusions about that.
Well, let me say it this way, Zach, and see if you agree with it. I think being in that facility is the first time that I've had the opportunity to be inside of Geodis Park. And I don't think anybody in favor of renovating the fairgrounds and allowing Bristol to pour money into it and using revenue bonds and taking it off the backs of the taxpayers, I don't think anybody. We're not against soccer. But the fact remains that the Speedway itself is the only part of the fairgrounds property that hasn't been renovated. And Geodis Park is an example of what the Speedway can resemble once this renovation takes place.
Exactly, and it works hand in hand with the entire property. Geodis Park is beautiful. I went to a concert there last month, and it's an excellent facility. It's very clean and well run. And the fact of the matter is, the track can play right into the hand of Geodis Park and vice versa, and co-hosting events and working together to support the community. It's the last piece of the puzzle. We have this brand new, beautiful expo center for the flea market and other events and expos. We've got Geodis Park, and now we need to do the last little bit, the redheaded stepchild that's been waiting since 2011 for those that live here. And that's the thing. The opposition has tried to paint this narrative as this is for the tourists. Well, I tell you who was in the room last night. There weren't any tourists there.
No.
Those were the people from Nashville, Tennessee in the room last night.
Would you say it was at least 2/3 in favor of the renovation in the room last evening? It might have even been 3/4. But the bottom line is this: the people that were voicing opposition, you used the word AstroTurf. I feel that way too, because they're making arguments, Zach, and you got to hold your tongue. And I know you you have the ability to do that on the Metro Council, so it wasn't a problem for you. But when they argue things like, well, we don't want more noise, there's not going to be more noise. There's going to be less noise if this deal goes through.
Exactly. And that's one of the main reasons that I support this, is because, you know what? Racing is loud, and you're never going to hear me say otherwise. All right. I've been to plenty of races. It's loud. And so I understand that the community is probably tired of that noise for those that chose to live next to a racetrack. And we're going to build a sound wall that's going to reduce the race day sound up to 50%. 50%, Matt. And I just don't understand how anyone could be against that unless they have motives that they'd rather see the racetrack just demolished.
And I just want your take, because you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I felt like I demolished this 30-second ad, and I think we can talk about it fairly because he's now no longer a part of the mayor's race. But the Jim,
the carpetbagger.
Oh yeah, the Jim Gingrich. I mean, Gingrich brings his business to Nashville. I'm told that he got over $100 million in tax abatements in doing so. And then he completely misrepresents the deal. He makes this association between spending money on a track versus hiring more police officers, which is nonsense. Just give the basics of the money on this and how it kind of takes Nashville off the hook.
Here's the basics of the money. The property taxpayers of Nashville, Tennessee are going to contribute $0.00 to renovating the 119-year-old historic Fairground Speedway. Who's going to pay for it? Bristol Motor Speedway, the sponsors, fans that are going and using the track. Sales tax and ticket revenue from the track will be dedicated to paying for it. Sponsorship, $1 million rent payment each year from Bristol Motor Speedway to the fairground to pay the debt, and that has a 1% escalation every year. Initially, there is a guaranteed minimum of $600,000 of the sponsorship coming in, also with an escalation each year. This is fiscally sound, and it removes what's now about a $30 to $40 million liability of needed improvements at the track just to bring it up to safety standards. Removes it off the backs of the property taxpayers. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm working for.
Well, in my fear, Zach, and I've talked to a number of the players there at the track, and they don't want to say this publicly, and I don't blame them, but if this deal goes dark, if this doesn't happen, if we don't see this light at the end of the tunnel, my fear is that the track will dry up and blow away. And I think that some really, really rich people in the neighborhood want to see that exact thing happen.
I think you're spot on. And I hate to resort to fear tactics, but there's no one else in line to work on renovating the track. And we have a partner that is unmatched in their quality and their ability to run and operate a racetrack and draw the crowds we need to sustain the finances there in Bristol Motor Speedway. And there's no one else coming knocking on the door. And there is no one else. It's just a special industry. And I'm afraid of the future of the track if we don't make this happen.
On a side note, Zach, did you fanboy a little bit when Kurt Busch showed up? I mean, I know I did because I'm a racing fan. So when
Of course I did, and standing next to him on stage while we had our picture made, oh my goodness,
that was pretty cool to see that level of support from the NASCAR community.
And it was also good to see Scott Borchetta there.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, he had a terrible accident earlier this year, and it's good to see him recovering well.
Well, look, you got my support. I mean, anything that we can do on our show, I mean, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. But even those that don't care for racing, I mean, I'll let you make the argument, Zach, instead of me making it. I mean, for those who give not one rip about race cars or motorsports, this is still a jewel of the city that's been around a long time. Speak to that for folks who don't really have an association with the racing component.
Well, sure. Before we had Titans football, before we had Predators hockey, we've had racing here in Nashville, Tennessee, and that track's been there 119 years, second oldest track in the entire country. And you have some of the greatest drivers of all time have come out of Nashville and have earned their licks at that track. And it's part of the fabric and the culture of our city. You think of country music, and it goes hand in hand with racing. And the fact of the matter is, people here love racing. They love that track. And if you don't give 2 cents about racing, I bet you give 2 cents about your property taxes. I guarantee every one of your listeners cares about property taxes. And what we don't want to see is we don't want to see our property taxes have to maintain something that right now we have a private entity that wants to step in and do for us. Why would we walk away from that? And the only reason we would is if we ultimately want to see that track demolished so more condos and yuppies can move into that neighborhood.
Or a parking lot. Yeah. So how does functionally, if we've got 2 meetings left and the fix is in, they're trying to fix this where this doesn't happen before the election. And I'll speculate on why that is, Zach. You don't have to agree or disagree, but I think that someone involved in this wants an election of a new mayor that's against this so that the new mayor can squash it. That's what I believe is their attempt is. So what has to happen for a special meeting to be called? I mean, how does that functionally happen?
Well, I think functionally what we're up against is we have the votes at council right now to do this.
Okay.
And that is why Councilman Sledge and those opposed have tried every procedural move and trick they can to delay this. If they knew that they had the votes to kill this, I don't know why they wouldn't say, hey, let's hear the mayor, let's take the vote and move on with our lives. But they haven't done that because they know that we have the votes, and we have to keep the votes, Matt. And so that's why as people are going through the polls, we need to make sure that we're electing council members, especially council members at large, that are committed to the Speedway and committed to the property taxpayers and making sure that we're not going to straddle them with this liability.
So there has to be 3 readings, and I'm just trying to functionally put this in my head. So there's a council meeting on August 1st and August 15th. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so we have to get another special meeting sometime in there.
That's correct.
And I mean, do you call for that? Who has to call for a special?
So a special meeting can be called one of 3 ways. You have 21 members of council can sign a letter calling for one, which is a majority.
Mm-hmm.
The vice mayor can call a special meeting, or the mayor can call a special meeting. But the other concern is when you have the meeting, you have to have a quorum show up, and that's 27. And unfortunately, it sounds like we might have some council members who want to abdicate their responsibility of doing their job and maybe not show up for a special called meeting. But yet everyone showed up for the Titans. They showed up for the Predators. They showed up for the baseball team. They showed up for the soccer team when they needed special called meetings to get their stadium deals through. So they better show up for this one.
Well, I think John Cooper would want this on his legacy. I don't know if that's true or not, but I had a chance to meet the vice mayor last night, Jim Schulman. And if the vice mayor has the ability to call this, I mean, he absorbed the information. He said he was there to listen and learn. So maybe he has felt, I mean, I'm not asking listeners to push that yet. You tell me. I'll take advice from you on this, Zach, because I don't want to screw the deal up. But if he has the ability, I feel like Jim Schulman would be open to calling a special meeting and then put the onus on the naysayers to show up to the meeting and actually account for the people that they represent.
Absolutely. But I also think Jim Schulman is a smart man, and I'm proud to support him. And I think he knows that he wants to know that a majority of the council supports it to move forward. And so I think we need to make sure that people are reaching out to their council members, and their council members are voicing to the vice mayor their support of having the meeting. They don't have to support this deal, but they should at least support having the meeting to hear this on its merit.
That's right.
Do our job.
That's right. Zach, thank you for your time. I'm sorry that we're out of time, but I appreciate everything that you do for this deal, and we'll talk to you again very soon.